It was supposed to be a weekend escape from the bustling city life. Four friends, Emily, Jason, Mia, and Tom, decided to go camping in the remote woods of Black Hollow Forest. The forest was known for its untouched beauty and dense, towering trees. They arrived at the edge of the forest on a bright Friday afternoon, excited and ready for an adventure. They parked their cars, shouldered their backpacks, and set off into the woods. The air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of pine and moss. The trail was narrow, winding through the trees like a snake. As they hiked deeper, the canopy above thickened, casting long, eerie shadows on the forest floor. By dusk, they found a suitable clearing to set up camp. They pitched their tents, gathered firewood, and built a campfire. The flickering flames cast a warm glow on their faces as they sat around, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. Tom, always the prankster, began telling a local legend.
You guys ever heard about the whispers in the woods?
He asked, his voice low and dramatic. The others shook their heads, intrigued.
They say this forest is haunted by spirits who whisper to those who dare to enter. If you hear them, it means that they've chosen you. And once they've chosen you, they won't stop until they've taken you.
Emily rolled her eyes, but a shiver ran down her spine. The forest seemed to grow darker and more menacing as Tom spoke.
It's just a story, right?
Mia said, trying to sound brave. Tom shrugged, a mischievous grin on his face.
Who knows? But if you hear the whispers, run.
The night deepened, and the forest around them fell silent. The friends retreated to their tents, the fire slowly dying out. Emily lay in her sleeping bag, staring at the tent's ceiling. Tom's story had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. Just as she was drifting off to sleep, she heard it. A faint, barely audible whisper. It was so soft that she thought she might be imagining it. She strained her ears, trying to catch the words, but they were unintelligible. Her heart pounded as she listened. The whispering grew louder, closer, surrounding her tent.
Tom, this isn't funny.
She called out, her voice trembling, but there was no response. She peeked out of her tent and saw nothing but darkness. The whispering stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Emily lay back down, her mind racing, but eventually fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning, Emily told the others about the whispers. Jason laughed it off, saying it was probably the wind, while Mia looked worried. Tom, however, seemed genuinely puzzled.
I didn't do anything.
He insisted.
I was asleep the whole time.
They decided to explore the area around their campsite, hoping to shake off the eerie feeling from the previous night. As they ventured deeper into the forest, they stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. It was weathered and dilapidated, almost hidden by overgrown vines and moss.
Let's check it out,
Jason said, leading the way. The others followed hesitantly. The inside of the cabin was dark and musty, filled with decaying furniture and cobwebs. On the floor, they found strange symbols carved into the wood, symbols none of them recognized.
These look ancient.
Mia whispered, running her fingers over the carvings. A sudden chill ran through the room, and the whispers started again. This time, all four of them heard it. Low, ghostly voices filled the cabin, speaking in a language they couldn't understand.
Let's get out of here,
Emily said, her voice shaking. They hurried back to their campsite, the whispers following them, growing louder and more persistent. That night, the whispering intensified. It was no longer just a faint sound, but a cacophony of voices surrounding their tents, seeping into their minds. The friends huddled together around the dying campfire, trying to make sense of what was happening.
It's the spirits.
Tom said, his earlier bravado gone.
The whispers in the woods. They're real.
We need to leave
Mia said urgently.
now.
But as they packed their belongings, the whispers turned into screams. Blood-curdling, agonizing screams that echoed through the forest. The trees seemed to close in on them, and the path they had taken earlier was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. The forest was alive, shifting and changing to keep them from escaping. They stumbled through the woods, the whispers and screams following them, driving them to the brink of madness. Exhausted and terrified, they found themselves back at the cabin. It was as if the forest had led them there deliberately. The door creaked open, beckoning them inside. With no other options, they entered. Inside, the symbols on the floor glowed faintly, casting an eerie light. In the center of the room was an old book, its pages filled with strange writings and drawings. Mia picked it up, her hands trembling, and said,
It's a ritual, a way to appease the spirits.
What do we have to do?
Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mia read from the book, her eyes widening in horror.
We have to offer a sacrifice. One of us has to stay behind so the others can leave.
The friends stared at each other in shock and disbelief. The whispers grew louder, urging them to decide.
I'll do it.
Tom said finally, his voice steady.
This is my fault. I started this by telling that story. Maybe I can end it.
With heavy hearts, they prepared for the ritual. Tom stood in the center of the symbols, while the others recited the incantation from the book. The whispers rose to a deafening roar, then abruptly stopped. An eerie silence fell over the cabin. Tom looked at his friends, a sad smile on his face, and shouted,
Go! Before it's too late!
Emily, Jason, and Mia ran out of the cabin, the forest path now clear before them. They didn't look back, not even when they heard Tom's scream echo through the woods. They ran until they reached their cars, collapsing in exhaustion and relief. Years later, the memory of that weekend still haunted them. They never spoke of it, but each carried the scars in their minds. Black Hollow Forest was declared off limits by the authorities after several other campers went missing. But sometimes when the wind was just right, Emily swore she could hear the whispers, and she knew deep down that the spirits were still there, waiting for their next victim. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dense pine forest. Four friends, Alex, Jamie, Sam, and Casey, sat around a crackling campfire in a secluded clearing. They had been planning this camping trip for months, eager to escape the pressures of city life. The air was filled with the scent of pine needles and the sound of chirping crickets. As darkness enveloped the forest, Jamie began telling a story about the legendary Shadow Man, a creature said to haunt these woods. According to local folklore, the Shadow Man was a malevolent spirit that appeared as a dark, human-like figure without a face. It was said to prey on campers, especially those who dared to disrespect the forest. Casey rolled his eyes.
Come on, Jamie, you don't actually believe in that stuff, do you?
Jamie shrugged, a playful glint in his eyes.
You never know. It's fun to think about. At least,
Sam threw another log onto the fire, sending sparks dancing into the night sky.
Well, if the Shadow Man does exist, he'll have to go through me to get to any of you.
They all laughed, their voices echoing through the trees. The firelight flickered, casting eerie shadows on their faces. As the night grew colder, they decided to turn in. Their tents were set up a short distance from the fire, and they each crawled into their sleeping bags, the forest sounds lulling them to sleep. Around midnight, Alex was jolted awake by a strange noise. It was a soft rustling, like something moving through the underbrush. They sat up, their heart pounding, and listened. The noise grew louder, closer. Alex unzipped the tent cautiously and peered out. The campfire had burned down to embers, casting a faint glow. Alex saw a dark shape moving at the edge of the clearing. It was too big to be an animal. The figure stood still for a moment, then vanished into the trees. Alex's heart raced. They hurried to wake the others.
Guys, wake up!
Sam groaned.
Alex is probably just a deer or something. Go back to sleep.
No, I'm serious. I saw something. Someone out there.
Jamie and Casey, now fully awake, exchanged worried glances. Jamie said as he grabbed a flashlight.
Let's check it out.
The four friends stepped out of their tents, huddling together as Jamie shone the flashlight into the forest. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating only the thick trunks of trees and dense underbrush. There was no sign of any intruder.
See? Nothing.
Sam said, though their voice lacked conviction. Casey shivered.
Maybe we should all stay in one tent tonight, just in case.
They squeezed into Sam and Jamie's tent, feeling slightly safer in numbers. Despite their cramped quarters, they eventually drifted back to sleep. A blood-curdling scream pierced the night, jerking them awake again. It was coming from the direction of their campfire. Sam grabbed the flashlight, and they all stumbled outside, fear gripping their hearts. The fire had been rekindled, blazing brightly. In the middle of the clearing stood a figure. It was tall, impossibly dark, and featureless, a silhouette against the firelight. The Shadow Man.
Run!
Alex screamed. They dashed into the forest, branches whipping against their faces as they fled. Behind them, they could hear heavy footsteps, too loud and too close for comfort. The Shadow Man was chasing them. Panic set in as they stumbled through the woods, desperate to put as much distance between themselves and the creature as possible. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees forming an impenetrable barrier.
Over here!
Jamie shouted, leading them toward a rocky outcrop. They squeezed through a narrow crevice, emerging into a small cave hidden from view. They huddled together, trying to catch their breath. The cave was damp and cold, but it felt safer than being out in the open.
Do you think we lost it?
Casey whispered.
I don't know.
Sam replied, his voice trembling.
We need to stay quiet.
For what felt like hours, they sat in silence, listening for any sign of the Shadow Man. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual nocturnal sounds absent. Just when they started to believe they were safe, a faint rustling reached their ears. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was just outside the cave. The friends held their breath, too terrified to move. A dark shape appeared at the cave entrance, blocking out the moonlight. The Shadow Man had found them.
No!
Jamie shouted, scrambling backward. The figure stepped into the cave, its form seeming to absorb the darkness. There was no escape. In a final act of desperation, Sam grabbed a large rock and hurled it at the creature. It passed through the Shadow Man as if he were made of smoke. The figure advanced, its faceless head turning toward each of them. Suddenly, the cave was filled with a blinding light. The Shadow Man recoiled, its form dissolving into the air. The friends shielded their eyes, unsure of what was happening. When the light faded, they found themselves alone. The Shadow Man was gone.
What just happened?
Casey stammered.
I have no idea.
Alex replied, his voice shaky.
But I think we scared it off.
They cautiously made their way back to their campsite, finding it undisturbed except for the still blazing fire. Exhausted and shaken, they sat around the fire, too scared to sleep. As dawn broke, they packed up their gear, eager to leave the haunted forest behind. The events of the night felt surreal, like a nightmare they couldn't quite shake. As they hiked back to their car, Jamie glanced over their shoulder, half expecting to see the Shadow Man lurking among the trees, but the forest was calm, bathed in the golden light of morning. They never spoke of that night again, but each of them knew they had encountered something beyond explanation. The Shadow Man was real, and they had survived his terror. And though they never returned to those woods, the memory of the Shadow Man lingered, a dark shadow at the edge of their minds, a reminder of the night the forest came alive with fear.